It's Laura from Hyperstamper back to show you another journal flip through, and this one I am going to be putting on my Etsy page momentarily as soon as I get all the photographs taken. I really love this one. This is a it's not an antique book, but it was a little bit older, not old enough to call it vintage, so I covered it with this beautiful piece of aged cotton that was from the cross stitch books that I recently put up, and they sold, unfortunately, immediately. Fortunately for me and the person who receives them, but unfortunately for the rest who are very interested in the cross stitch books. And having said that, this one is going up momentarily as well, so stay tuned. This one here, I used a vintage doily here, and this came from another junk journal I made out of a canvas painting cover, and that was one of the pieces I had to trim off, and it was just so beautiful. I kept it and made it into a little bookmark. This is a photograph. The top was all sort of burned out by the photographer back in, I'm going to say, the 1930s or 40s, but it was so lovely. I just added a little bit of lace there to cover that part up. And this is the inside spine and signature markings and netting from an antique book. And then I just added some more lace to frill it up. So let's take a little tour here. It's going to move this decorative piece out of the way. So we have some good white journaling space here and a couple of tea-dyed pages throughout my journal just for extra journaling space and sturdy journaling space. And the rest is all 100% authentic, antique and vintage ephemera. There's no digital copies, commercial replicas, anything. We've got that nice Canadian vintage stamp that I received a whole collection of recently. So you'll see them in my journals a lot, which is great because I'm Canadian and it's kind of fun to use a little Canadian marking in my journals. This is a page from The Magic Garden, that classic book from the early 1900s. And another one of those Christmas Carol cardstock pages. And look at this beautiful one with the grapes on the vine. 1930s Monopoly money. And just some vintage, postage here, markings. And I made this pocket out of an antique book page mounted on top of a 1930s music sheet. And this page came from the early 1900s book, Emerald Isle. Again, it's that Irish book of poems. And look at this beautiful Cromwell's Bridge. Isn't that fantastic? And on the back side, there's the rest of the poem and lots of space for you to journal on. We'll just tuck that back into here. I try to use as much space as I can for tuck spots, but also mindful of leaving lots of white space for you to journal on. This is from a vintage bird book. Isn't that lovely? And it's on glossy paper, which isn't always the case, but even though it's on glossy, it's got this beautiful aged coloring there. And there's that 1930s music sheet on the flip side. And these are all flip sides. Lots of space here for you. And then I put in another wonderful tuck pocket here, and I hand stamped thankful here because I don't know what you're using your journals for. I use mine for gratitude, so I put gratitude in every one of my journals. Look at this little cutie patootie. This is from a crochet magazine. So cute. Oh my gosh. And some wonderful craft advertisements on the back. That's how women used to work from home and be homemakers, but also make a little money on the side selling some of their craftware, as I'm doing, even though I have a full-time job as well. 1926 ledger pages here, and inside, mounted on top of this 1945 dictionary page, is this wonderful 1938 Paris, France almanac page from Wednesday, April 6, 1938, Mercredi 6 avril 1938. I hope I said that right. And again, from that Career and Ives book from 1902, a collection of plates. Plate 170 here, Sunrise on Lake, Saranac. And inside the full page spread, I was very careful not to cover up the seam here. Two beautiful plates here, plate 169 and one called Out for a Day's Shooting. So that would have been when they'd gone on a hunt. And then over here, a lovely deer image, and I get a lot of requests when I tell you I can personalize your journals for deer images. So there's one there. this is just an antique book page with some blank white space on it, and this little vintage glass envelope filled with vintage stamps from various countries, and I made the pocket out of a children's book from the 1930s. And there's that dictionary page again. And we have this wonderful senior basketball team, and somebody back in the day wrote Audie Smith on there. That must have been somebody who was on the team, maybe not in the picture. Poor fella. Let's see. Oh, here's a rugby team. This is from the 1940s, late 1940s Magna Charta yearbook. And more hand-stamped on tea-dyed pages there that I did. And on this page, I made another one of these wonderful pockets with vintage playing cards. You'll see those in the last 10 journals that I've made, and then I'll switch up all the ephemera that goes in them. And a 1950s bingo card here. They're always fun. Crowd pleasers. Hard to find though. Authentic. Hard to find. And of course, this is one of the prints from the Henri Rousseau book of prints. This is a Parisian artist from 1956. Well, the artist painting is older, but the print is from 1956. This is a late 1800s book page here, and a table doily. And the flip side is over here. I'll show you how I made a pocket out of that. And a 1940s Theatre World magazine with wonderful articles and advertisements, and this fantastic full page spread of how to build an English garden mid-century. It's just lovely. I love it. And again, there's that Theatre Arts, or Theatre World, sorry, magazine page. And I made this side of the doily into a pocket here. You can stuff lots of things in here, but I have stuffed a page from an antique book, Flint and Feather, and that's from that Indigenous author from the late 1800s, and that is one of her poems on this side here, Pauline Johnson. And if you're interested in Indigenous antique books, I do have one on Etsy called Flint and Feather, if it's still there. Here is another wonderful children's book page. Look how sweet this little girl is. And the colors are still as wonderful as they were in the 1930s. Staring at a little squirrel, which is what I have a deep passion for, squirrels. This book title here, Endings and Beginnings, which I just thought was a fun title to put in a journal. And my 1926 ledger page with some handwritten notes on here. Really fun to go through these. And on this side, I made double pocket tucks. And look at this fun one. My gosh, that is British Columbia, and it's written to somebody in New York in 1952. Isn't that fun? I'm going to tuck that back there. That's where it lives now. And you can do whatever you like with that fun piece. Mounted on a vintage atlas page, and I just tea-dyed this paper here for you. And I made this tag here out of an antique book page and made this little cluster. This is special. I had a hard time. I've had this for years, and I finally decided it was time to give it a new home. This came from another yearbook called the Delphian, and it is the autographs page. So they literally just autographed it. Back in the 70s, when I went to high school, we would write silly, goofy things in there, but this is just autographs. I kind of thought that was fun. So somebody gets to enjoy all of that. Another one of these wonderful poems by Pauline Johnson. And of course, classic 1950s full page recipe image, pineapple layer cake. It does not look good. I'm just gonna say it, but I think they're fun. I think the colors are hysterical, and I hope you enjoy that one. Another Pauline Johnson poem here and here. And this is also from a vintage recipe book, an advertisement for Blue Ribbon Tea. And there are some Pearl Shops receipts in here from the 1950s from a store in Cincinnati. And the flip side of that wonderful ledger page. And that brings us to the end. So I hope that you like this one. Visit my Etsy shop at etsy.com/shop/Hyperstamper with a capital H. And I'd love to see you again in my next video. Don't forget to subscribe.